Hello, I'm a radiotherapist. Today we have Dr. Karavani here with us, and we are going to speak about electromodulation and the body's self-healing mechanism.
Yes, thank you. It's quite an important subject because we need to understand how the body functions. We have been created at a time where there were no hospitals, no doctors. We couldn't ring for an 111 or what it is for an emergency or an ambulance to come. So the body is already built with self-healing mechanisms. Okay, fine. What does it mean? We have all these organs in our body and all these cells. They are connected with central organs. And central organs, we have three of them. We've got the heart, which is connected with every cell and every organ in our body. We've got the brain, which is connected with fibers to nearly every space that we have. And we've got the intestines, who are connected to everything because they have to detoxify, to take the toxins out and remove them. They do that through loops, which means they have a line that goes from the central organ to the peripheral organs and to all the cells to give the commands. We've got the elements that come back from these cells and these organs to the central organs.
Yes.
For the heart, it is simple. The arteries bring the blood with the information, with food, with oxygen, and we need that because a cell cannot survive without that. And it comes back through the venous flow with the feedback, the waste products, and the carbon dioxide. That's how a cell lives. For the nerves, the same thing. We've got nerves that go from the brain to the organs, like for instance the muscles or the bladder or any other organ. We call them afferent nerves. And we got the feedback again from these organs to the brain, and we call them afferent nerves. And then the same thing goes for the lymphatic vessels. We've got the blood that comes into our system, it feeds the cells, etc. And then we get all these waste products and all the fluids, extra fluids, goes back to the veins and from there back to the heart, and it closes a loop. Nothing in the body happens without feedback. And this is extremely important to understand because this is why we thrive and we live so many years in good health, because the body is aware, the central organs are aware every millisecond, every second, what's going on in the periphery. Okay? So when you look at your heart rate, 60 per minute, which means that every cell gets once in a second on average everything that it needs, and we get the feedback and the waste products back.
Yes.
For nerves, it's even faster. It's in the milliseconds because they travel at 120 meters per second. The lymphatics are slower, but they also drag all these toxins and all these fluids. Without the feedback, the body doesn't know what's happening. And this feedback needs to be instantly. Now, how does this body work? Of course, we are subjected to damages. Damages because we hurt ourselves, even when we're young. Damages also because something happened in the body. We didn't eat good food, toxic food, or whatever it is. Damages because we didn't sleep well, because we were exhausted. A lot of damages. Now, these damages, they create signals. And we will see very soon that the body is electrical. So it creates very tiny electronic signals. This is what we call in natural medicine the first stage of disease. Nothing happens. You go and sleep well. You wake up in the morning and everything is gone. But the body repaired it during the night because the body can sense these signals before they become a symptom, before it becomes visible. And it can correct it directly, which means the first doctor that is called at a very, very early stage. And it's corrected instantly by feedback loops that work in milliseconds and seconds. Once it evolves to a symptom, is a different story. We are already in a stage that is further. We call it stage 2 and 3 of the disease, not stage 1. And there you see something. And then you have to call your doctor, go there on an appointment, get the medication, come back, try it, come back 6 weeks later. You see how that loop, outside loop, is very, very slow and very, very limited. And
Yes.
the doctor doesn't get the information firsthand when it happened, gets it much later. And the loop is very, very slow, and there's no awareness of what's really happening inside the body. That is why self-healing is our most precious mechanism of healing and thriving. So, when this self-healing mechanism of the body doesn't work, we're basically in deep trouble.
Yes.
And we know that this deep trouble created diseases and conditions and situations in the past that led to death and invalidity and awful things. So that's why we are grateful that an external healing mechanism, an external feedback, slower, okay, not understanding everything, okay, not a direct feedback, okay, but it saved us from dying. Okay?
Yes.
So it worked great for situations where we needed emergency, but for the daily repair, it's not sufficient. The daily repair needs a reactivity that is in the milliseconds, in the seconds, day and night. Of course, we can't sit in a hospital day and night. It's impossible. They wouldn't understand these small electronic signals. So we cannot rely on medicine to correct chronic problems like, for instance, aging.
Yes.
Okay? So we have to understand that system of self-healing. So these central organs, they work electrical. All our body is electrical. From the cell that is minus 70 millivolt inside, so it's negative power inside. And at minus 70 millivolt, it functions well. It connects well with all the other cells, okay? Once this voltage drops to minus 20 millivolt, we get cancer cells. So if you want to deal with cancer cells in a very efficient way, we need to put this voltage to drive it up. And when it's back to minus 70, the cancer disappears. Okay? So the cells are charged. The loops are electrically charged. Okay? The central organs generate electricity. See? And that is how this whole system works electrically.
Yes.
Let's dive into the main cause of aging. Studies have shown that the leading cause of aging is a lack of oxygen. First is we have 40% less oxygen on the red blood cell, which carries oxygen. And secondly, the flow, the circulation of blood through the vessels is about 2.6 times slower. So imagine a bus with 40% less people in the bus. And instead of coming every hour, it comes every 2.6 hours slow, which means we get less oxygen. And when we get less oxygen, a lot of bad things happen. So let's look at the molecule of oxygen and how is it related to electrons and electricity. The molecule of oxygen can only travel in the red blood cell when it's binded to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a molecule inside the red blood cell that has 4 positions of iron, and these 4 positions of iron can catch this red blood cell. Now, iron is a very special atom because it exists in two valences, 3 plus and 2 plus. And it can go from the 3 plus to the 2 plus with an additional electron, because an electron is negative, the 3 plus with one negative becomes 2 plus. The iron 2 plus can bind this oxygen and carry it around in the red blood cell. Now, how many hemoglobin molecules do we have in a red blood cell? About 250 million. Times 4, because we got 4 iron atoms, which means 1 billion molecules of oxygen in the red blood cell. A real billionaire is one that has 1 billion of these oxygen molecules in the red blood cell. This is the only thing the body understands. Now, once the red blood cell is charged with the oxygen, it is also highly negative, and it has a negative shield around, which we call zeta potential. This zeta potential, this negative current around, is necessary because it will repulse the other red blood cell, his neighboring red blood cell, so that they don't clutter together and form like these clutters, the problem that we had during COVID, the cluttering and closure of the vessels. So we need them to be one further from the other. One has to push the other, okay? So we call it in French rouleau formation, like roll formation, like the rolls of money or the rolls of the jetons in a casino, okay? Good. Once they are free, we need them also to be far from the wall of the vessels. And that's where another electric phenomenon comes. The walls become negative when they are healthy. There is a glycocalyx molecule. I will not enter into details of that, but they become negative. And when they become negative and the red blood cell is negative, they push the red blood cell to the center. And when it goes to the center, it doesn't have friction anymore with the vessel, and it travels much faster. It travels so fast that it can reach again the speed that we want. So here we are. The red blood cell has more oxygen. This is what we wanted in the beginning, compensate the 40%. And we want the speed to go back to the normal speed and not 2.6 times slower. Good. But all this is totally irrelevant if we cannot reach the cells. And that is where we have to understand what's happening. A cell is about 40 micron in diameter. 40. A normal human cell, on average, can be a bit smaller, a bit bigger, but about 40 micron. A micron is 1,000th of a millimeter. So we got this cell and all these neighboring cells, and in between we have spaces where they can be delivered. Consider it like these small roads that you have in south of Italy or wherever you have big cities with old quarters where barely a bike can go through, and you have mailboxes. We have to deliver in those mailboxes in these narrow streets. So we have there the very fine end of the blood vessel, which we call the capillaries. The capillaries are 4 microns in diameter, and so they can squeeze between the cells and deliver everything that we need: oxygen, nutrients, information, etc. And then they go back to the venous side, where they enter into bigger vessels and return to the heart. Now we have a slight problem with this situation. Nature solved it, don't worry. The red blood cell is 8 microns, and it has to squeeze itself in a small capillary of 4 microns. How does this happen? Because everything is charged electrically, the red blood cell becomes malleable. You can squeeze him, you can twist him, you can fold him. So he can enter into a smaller vessel. There is hardly zero pressure at a diameter of 4 microns. But there is an electrical phenomenon on the wall which pulls the red blood cell electrically inside, and on the venous side it's becoming positive, and it pulls the red blood cell through the capillary like a magnet would pull a piece of iron. So it's not the pump of the heart that is responsible, but it is a magnetic electrical phenomenon that pulls it back to the venous side, and from there it goes to the heart. To illustrate the electrical part in the circulation, and definitely in the microcirculation in the capillaries, we will look at a presentation, a TED Talk of Professor Dr. Seneff from MIT University, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is the biggest university in the world on technology, and she will explain us how this goes.
So when that system falls apart, lots of bad things happen. So here's a picture, very schematic, of red blood cells traveling through a capillary. They're very crowded in the capillary. It's a very tight squeeze. They decorate themselves with sulfate outside their cell, and they deliver that sulfate as they pass through the capillary. They shed it, and they're therefore shedding negative charge. And that negative charge is then building up along the capillary wall. And it's very interesting because as they do this, by the time they get to the vein and all of them are shedding their negative charge, this creates a battery between the artery and the vein, which then actually propels the red blood cell through the artery, through the capillary, because it's attracted to the venous side because of this battery. It's attracted to the cathode, and that will pull the red blood cell through so that the heart doesn't have to work so hard to pump. And furthermore, these layers, these sulfated layers along the wall of the capillary are very slick jello. The red blood cell can just slide through almost frictionless effort to get through that capillary. When these things break down, the red blood cell gets stuck and you have a no-flow situation. So basically, this voltage change that's created by the red blood cell itself actually drives the red blood cell through the capillary and makes the blood flow properly.
We'll watch a movie. It is video microscopy in vivo, which means live, where we can see the influence of electromodulation on the circulation and how the blood flows much quicker, much faster with electromodulation when the red blood cells are charged. So, what does the heart do? The heart is definitely not a pump. It is a small pump of between 4 and 40 watts, totally insufficient to push the blood through the whole body. On top of that, we've got two pumps, two ventricles, left and right. One is making a small cycle to the lungs, and the other one is making a huge cycle through the whole body. If you want to compare it, a small cycle would be like maybe New York, and the big cycle will be the whole of North America, to give you a comparison. Okay? So, if the heart is not a real pump, what does it do? It's one muscle. First, we have to understand that it's really only one muscle folded. And when it's folded, each ventricle is like 7 facets. And when it contracts, it creates a vortex. And this vortex charges the red blood cells electrically. We thought a long time that it wasn't the case, but recent studies showed that it charges the red blood cell. So the red blood cell is full of electrons. It goes to the lungs. It catches the oxygen from the lungs. It binds them, and it goes further. And because they are negative, the walls are negative, in the capillaries, we have electrical charges that pull them through. The whole circulation can go around. So here we have our first biofeedback loop. A central organ, the heart, vessels that go through all the organs, because there is no organ who can live without oxygen, and who brings it back to the heart. This first biofeedback loop is totally electric. On top of that, the central organ that generates it, the heart, is producing electricity. And it's in fact our biggest generator of electrical current. And that's important to understand because problems of the heart, which might be mechanical, electrical, or even emotional, are affecting the load of electrons and are affecting the health and the oxygen that will come to every cell. The second loop is a nervous loop, which goes from the brain and through the spine and all the nerves that go out of the spine. Now, a nervous system, it relies on two major cells. One is the neuron. We all heard about neurons, which is a cell with a long string, which is called the dendrite, and it connects with the next cell and the next cell till it reaches the organ that we need. And there you get the impulse, and the impulse can be you go to the bathroom, or you sweat, or your muscles are activated, whatever it is that we need in this region. Okay? So the neuron is a living cell, and a living cell needs oxygen. So if we don't have enough oxygen from the first loop, the second loop, the nervous loop, will not function well. And then we have something amazing, and that is around the axon, we have small cells, which are called the cells of Schwann. They are small cells wrapped around, and they're also living cells. And we need them to live through oxygen. And why they are there? Because sometimes we need a speed of 120 meters per second. So we don't want to go along the axon, but we want to leap. And if you have to leap, your speed increases, which means that you can go a full length from top to bottom with 120 meters per second through these cells that force you to leap from one gap to the other instead of traveling slowly by foot. Okay? So, the health of our neural system depends on these two cells, and they depend on their turn on oxygen, and oxygen depends on its turn on electricity. And what is conveyed as a message through the nerves is an electrical impulse. So here we have our second biofeedback loop, a central organ, the brain, which generates electricity, and we can measure that with an electroencephalogram, just like we can measure an electrocardiogram from the heart. We've got all these connections which are electrical through cells who are fed by oxygen, which is also an electrical concept. So here we are with the second loop. The third loop is the lymphatics. And we always thought the lymphatics is like a passive thing. They don't even have a pump. The lymphatic pump is in fact the contractions of our muscles. So we didn't know how it works. We know now much more about the lymphatics. We know that the lymphatics are there once the blood comes out of your system and the fluid and the toxins out of your cells. They are blocked at stations that we call lymph nodes, where it's detoxified. Compare it a little bit in your control in an airport. So you're there with all your luggage, waiting in turn to be your turn. You open this luggage, put the liquids out, your computer out, etc., and then you pass through. Most of these luggage will go through. People take their luggage and they go to the gate. Okay? This is what happens normally when arterial blood comes in and the venous blood comes out. No problems, no impurities. You go straight to the gate. But sometimes there is something suspicious in this baggage. And then it goes on a sidetrack. This sidetrack are the lymphatics. They go over another conveyor belt and they come to an inspector. This is your lymph node. He asks you to open the bag. Sometimes everything is okay. Sometimes he has to throw out a knife, a scissor that is too long, or a perfume that has too many milliliters. And then you can join the group and go to the gate. So you join the venous flow and you go back to the heart. This is how it works. Turns out that the lymph nodes are activated by nerves. There is a nervous connection to the lymph nodes who help them in doing their job. We do know that the nerves are electric, and we understand now why this last loop, important detoxifying loop, is also something that depends on electricity. Now, most lymphatics, they come from the intestines. We always thought the intestines What is the relationship with electricity? Well, the contraction, the motility of these intestines to give you the peristaltic so that your food can move from one space to another, from your mouth till the other end, is something that is activated by cells that generate electricity just like the heart, and they are called the cells of Cajal. And they create like an electrical symphony so that everything goes well and smooth. And that is extremely important because when this fails, we start to absorb toxins into the bloodstream. We start to absorb things that should not be in the bloodstreams, and we call it the leaky gut syndrome, and we'll talk about that later, and how leaky gut syndrome is connected with nearly 20 very serious diseases like cancer, dementia, etc. So here we have our three loops. The intestines, this electrical impulse can be recorded at what we call an electrogastrogram. Just like an electrocardiogram, an electroencephalogram, we have an electrogastrogram, which records this peristaltic movement. When this is not okay, till now, we had very little options to solve that because pills to liquefy the stool and to get it out as a liquid is not the real good physiological option. That's now how the body functions. We'll understand with electromodulation how we can solve that in a totally different way. So we got our body. Body has been created with a hospital already inside. The doctors already inside. They can see every abnormality when it is still an electrical signal before it becomes a symptom and a disease. Then they send signals to the central organs. The central organs send a signal back for repair. This loop goes on and on for milliseconds and seconds till everything is repaired and we keep our health and our stable, balanced situation. In medical terms, this is called homeostasis, balance, homeostasis. And this homeostasis is the secret of our youth and our health. When this fails, we have two ways to interfere. Go to a clinic and a doctor, or try to act on a failing self-healing mechanism. When this body, this electrical body, wants to function properly, it needs molecules and atoms to transfer this electricity. And we know that electrolytes, these are molecules when they dissolve in water, they end up in a positive and a negative ion, are the ones necessary to transport the electricity. We'll watch now a very short clip on how water does not conduct electricity, but once we put salt in it, which is NaCl, the electricity runs through the water and we see that the current flows. So our body is not made out of 70% water, it's made out of 70% of an electrolyte solution. We have more than 80 different electrolytes in our body to make it function. Otherwise, this whole electrical system that is our body will collapse. Okay? So, we need to eat salt regularly, and sea salt in particular, because it has the right electrolytes for our body. So we see the body as an electrical system. Our water in the body is not pure water, is water with electrolytes. Even if we go to a hospital and they give us water, it's not plain water, it's water with an electrolyte. We call it saline water, 0.9 of a salt solution. And that's how we function, okay? So that is quite important to understand. We've got three central organs, we got these loops, we got the body and the cells, and everything is bathing in an electrolyte solution. These loops keep us young and healthy. What happens with time? We lose electrolytes in our body. through sweating, to urinating, through the stool, through breathing, because we breathe out more water than it is. And so we lose electrolytes, and we compensate it usually only by table salt. Table salt is only 2 electrolytes, NaCl, while we possess around 80. So most of us, if not all of us, are deficient in magnesium, the best conductor ever, are deficient in a lot of calcium, potassium, etc. So we don't function very well because we lack those electrolytes. This is number one. A second element is we don't get electrolytes from the soil, from the earth, because we don't walk barefoot anymore. We walk with shoes which isolate us from the soil, so we don't get these earthing capacities, electrolytes and electricity and electrons from the soil. This is quite important. We don't wake up and spend some time with looking at the morning sun, this soft sun in the morning, which brings us photons into the retina, which are then converted into electrons. We eat food that blocks the electricity in our body. Alcohol, saturated fats, sugars, they all block the electrical current in our body. On top of that, in the last 30 years, we've been accustomed to LED light. Now, LED lights, even if it's a yellow light, has a peak around 420 nanometers in the blue, and this peak blocks the mitochondria, which are our centrals of energy, blocks their flow of electrons, which means that the mitochondria, which are electrical powerhouses, are reduced in their activity, and we lose electrical power within the body. So, but we can live without these screens. So you will see sometimes people who put glasses with a filter on, red filter, and others, not to get these wavelengths that block our mitochondria. So there are many, many reasons, including our bad sleep, including stress, which affects the heart, and we know that the heart is a big generator of electricity. So we got many, many reasons to compensate for this deterioration of our biofeedback loops. Now, this deterioration of the biofeedback loops happens in a visible way later in life. 50, 55 years, it spikes up. So till the age of 50, 55, our aging, our capacity to regenerate is gradually degrading, but not so much. And once we enter 50, 55 years, it goes up. And this is what we call aging. And this is what we call the lifestyle diseases. This is what we call the degenerative diseases. And this is where the focus of medicine is right now, to rejuvenate us at this time. Now, when you ask me, when do we start aging? Probably very shortly after the conception. I know people look at that, conception, yeah? In utero, when we are a fetus, reports have been made that when we lose like a small part of the digit, we can regrow that, just like a salamander can regrow its tail. Once we're born, we don't have this capacity anymore. But we do have the first 10, 15 days the capacity to heal without scarring. And we lose that also when we are a baby of 2 weeks old and further, we lose that. So, and gradually and slowly we see that aging process is starting. It's not apparent, it's not a problem, but when we start having 50, 55 years old, menopause, all these situations, it all spikes up. Mainly because we were not supposed to live above the age of 50, above the reproduction age. We're not supposed to live. Our life was meant to end after reproduction. So, but we're living longer, and so we need to take care of the electricity in our body and of the biofeedback loops if you want to be older and healthier. Because now the focus is on health more than on aging. We know that we can't live longer than about 120 years. This span hasn't been extended over time. What has been extended is the healthy years that we have till then. Now, electricity runs further than only the loops. We know that the human cells of an organ, they communicate as one organ. We knew that already for the brain. When we do something, when we have a thought, when we have an aspiration, when we move our hands, when we write, we know that it's not only one neuron that is working. We know that it's a team of neurons working. A few billion neurons are working together, and they have an electrical programmation to act as one single unit, as one single organ. It's like a football team. It's like a platoon in the army. There is not one single person who does it. It's a team. Without that team, nothing will happen. Try to have a football team without your goalkeeper. You will understand it very quickly. Okay? So, here we are, and we thought it's only for the brain. Now we understand that every organ has a programmation to understand where it belongs, and this programmation is electrical. Without that programmation, it becomes a rogue cell. Now, in the macro world, we ourselves are also part of a bigger programmation. We are born, we're not lost. We have an identity. We have a father and a mother, whether they're together or not, but we have a father and a mother. Around us, we have a family. We have a village. We have a country. We have a faith. We have later a job. We have a certain culture. And all this creates a bond between the people so they can function as one unit. And this is held for humans to function as one unit, but on the level of the organs is exactly the same. This happens for cells as ion channels. Ion channels, we know the electrolytes, they split in ions. These ion channels are very small and they communicate with each other to convey this message and to be healthy. And at the same time, they listen to the loops. Now, how can we compare that? You see, when we have a philharmonic orchestra, 100 musicians, you got a great director, Zubin Mehta, and he's there. And so what happens? All these musicians, they listen to each other and they can adjust the noise and the music so that it will be like a philharmonic piece. And they look at the director and they follow the instructions and everything goes fine. Once we lose the contact with the director, that means contact with the biofeedback loops and with the central organs. Once we lose the contact and the communication between the musicians, all of a sudden the trumpet is playing too high, the violin is playing too low, and we don't know what to do. We get a dysfunctional situation. Dysfunctional skin, we see wrinkles appear and patches, etc. What do we have to do to be in tune with nature? Is to reconnect everything. As long as we still can do that and have an harmonious skin connected with the central organs. What we tend to do now is take a laser, kill the musicians that play too loud, and take those who play too slow and too soft and put there a microphone underneath and an amplifier and make them sound bigger. Now, all this is not interconnected, and we'll understand with the skin, it might look okay for a while, but with a philharmonic orchestra, this will be a disaster. Okay? So we need to think of more physiological, more natural ways to heal ourselves. This is one element that is important, and we'll watch a small video about that now, about the cohesion of the cells and how important that is.
What if the most important intelligence isn't in your brain at all, but is instead encoded in the electrical conversations happening between trillions of cells? At Tufts University, Dr. Michael Levin tells us about the future of medicine by revolutionizing our understanding of biology. How so? He decodes these bioelectric signals, the recently discovered language that tells cells what shape to build, how to repair damage, and even when to become cancerous.
Refers to the ability of cells and other biological components to communicate in electrical networks. We have hopes and dreams and memories and preferences that our individual neurons don't have. What underlies all of that is the electrical network that enables the collective to process information that no individual part can process. Cells have little tiny proteins on their surfaces which can open and close to let in charges. So things like potassium and chloride, these charges go in and out and they become unbalanced. There ends up being a voltage gradient, like a little battery, a difference across the membrane. And that voltage difference can be felt by neighboring cells. It's really a magical thing where the content of the thoughts of the system manipulate the system itself. You end up with this mind-body interface. How can information have a physical effect in the world? This is it right here. As soon as you've made cells connected by, for example, voltage-gated ion channels, you now see that the information patterns that they process now affect the system, the structure of the system, and the way that it will process information in the future.
So we've all seen Professor Michael Levin, which is one of the leading scientists on regeneration, and bioelectricity, okay, on how this cohesion functions as a team. But there is more to that. We have underneath the skin, underneath the 3 layers of the skin, epidermis, dermis, hypodermis, we have a fascia, which we call superficial fascia. It's deeper than the skin. It's a network of fibers, collagen fibers, who are elastic and who are electric. They conduct electricity, which runs from the feet to the head, and they produce electricity when they are twisted. We call it piezoelectricity. So when you have a massage, you pull on the skin, you squeeze it, you pinch it, you create electricity in this fascia by a mechanism that we call piezoelectricity, and you conduct it from below till above. This fascia is connected with all our ligaments. It's connected with another fascia on top of the muscles and inside the fibers of the muscles and around the cells. In fact, everything in our body is covered with a fascia. To state it very simply, nobody walks naked in the body. Everybody wears a coat of this fascia, and this coat is electric, and there is a full interconnection from the surface of your skin till the full depth into your bones, from the top of your toes till the head, and all this is electrical. Restoring this communication will bring us more health, more cohesion, and a healthier body. So now we start to understand how the body functions with a lot of communication. It communicates nearly on every level. Everybody checks everybody out. It's like a village. See, everybody knows everything from everybody. And it functions because you have less criminality. Everybody knows everything. On the second, even before the crime is committed, they know what's happening. This is the force of the biofeedback. The day he starts to sharpen the knife, his mother asks him, what are you going to do with this knife? Okay, you're not a cook. So the crime is prevented. See? And we, in medicine, we only see the things when the crime has already been committed, and we're looking in the big city where the assassin is. See, so this is a bit an analogy of what is happening. Now, it doesn't end there. Electrons are anti-inflammatory. Once we get a full load of electrons, inflammation goes down in the body. And we know that inflammation is one of the leading causes of aging in such an extent that we don't call it inflammation anymore, but we call it inflammaging from aging, okay? So walking barefoot, sleeping on a grounding mat, having enough electrons by eating green vegetables, etc., taking electrolytes will reduce the inflammation in our body, will reduce the diseases, and will reduce also all these pathologies that are associated with inflammation. Now we come to the 7th and last element of bioelectricity. So we had the 3 loops, we had the cohesion of the cells, we had the fascia, We had the electricity and reduction of inflammation. Now, once we have electrical impulses in the body that signals repair, we need to do something here, okay? We activate our sleeping agents in the body to repair. One of them is the platelets, thrombocytes, the platelets. We know that they're activated by thrombine whenever there is a trauma. If you have a trauma, you start bleeding, there is thrombine that is secreted, and the thrombine attracts the thrombocytes. The thrombocytes have granules inside. They contain growth factors. These growth factors are released, the wound is closed, and the repair is done. But we also understand now that an electrical impulse, like electromodulation, will equally attract these thrombocytes, release the granules, and create this closure. So that sheds new light on regeneration, because not only the thrombocytes will do that, all the other sleeping repair systems in our body will also be activated, including stem cells, etc. So we developed a technique so many decades ago to heal cartilage and tendons, because orthopedic surgeons, they were dealing with organs with very little or no blood flow. Like tendons and cartilage, they have no blood flow, like the face or hairs, etc. So they used to draw blood from the veins, centrifugate it, discard the red blood cells because they're not needed, keep only a little bit of plasma and the thrombocytes, platelets, and we called it platelet-rich plasma because we have more platelet per cc of plasma than in whole blood, and then inject it where they needed it, traumatize it so they will release the granules, and this PRP therapy was gaining traction for orthopedic surgeons. Now we tried to copy that also for skin and for hair and for other places, but we forgot that we have already a lot of blood on the spot. So we have enough scientific evidence now to understand that electromodulation will activate these platelets and other agents like stem cells and repair the body. And we have in our face and in our hair about 600 to 800 ml cc of blood waiting to be activated, which is fairly 100 times and more the blood that we draw from our veins, centrifugate, lose 40% of its action, and re-inject in these organs. So here we have a new way of activating regeneration in our body through electromodulation. These are the seven actions that we now already encountered and acknowledged of electromodulation. So we got a little bit of a dilemma now. As long as the loops are not damaged, and the damage of the loops, we call them vasculopathy for the vessels, neuropathy for the nervous system, and lymphopathy for the limbs, and all the rest of the 7 points, as long as our systems are not very damaged, we don't even pay attention to aging. We got a little bit of aging, but it doesn't concern us. But when they kick in, we shouldn't wait too long because sometimes we have irreparable damage. See what I mean? So let's say we have a gum problem and then it continues, etc. And then at a certain point, we might lose a tooth and regrowing it only through electromodulation won't be possible. So we'll have a tooth transplant, okay? So because it's inevitable. Regeneration must be taken as early as possible to be as effective as possible. Even if you believe that it's not necessary at that moment, be sure that everything is already deteriorating inside. Okay, we know that it starts from as early as conception. So can you imagine when you are 35 or 40? At that time, regeneration will be full, 100%, nice, uneventful. If you start when it's really visible, like 55 or 60, you will have a nice effect, but you will have to spend more time and more effort to get the results, okay? So I believe with time, people will start with electromodulation earlier because they understand the importance of it. It's totally non-invasive, it doesn't give you any pain, etc. And you have 100% results. Like if you go to the gym, you know when you start, everybody will have results sooner or later. With electromodulation, everybody will have results sooner or later. So, as of my profession in the aesthetics, and I started in 1984, and then I was one of the first to inject Botox in 1991, and then we continued to inject and to do. We saw a lot of patients. We started with the lasers, etc. And then in 2012, we saw that the faces changed. People didn't look anymore like they looked before. And we were very puzzled with that. We didn't know what to do. So I contacted my colleagues in Hollywood, and they told me, well, you know, we stopped doing that because they have an altered face and we cannot put them on the screen anymore. So nobody knew at the time what was happening, but my life is full of coincidences, and my daughter married the son of a famous radiologist. They were a group of 4, and they had a CT scan in their clinic. And so we examined what is happening inside the skull. And we saw that the muscles are disappearing. And because the muscles don't pull on the bone anymore, we also lose bone. So we started to study the muscles and what to do with it. And we understood that the problem is not the muscle, but the nervous connections of the muscle with the brain. So what is happening there? As we understood, everything is feedback in the body. So the brain is a very sophisticated organ, and it sends signals through these nerves that are very sophisticated cables. It sends them to the muscle, and they enter in thousands of little connections, nearly to different groups of fibers in the muscle, which means that when the brain talks to the muscle, he doesn't talk the same language and intensity on the totality of the muscle. There are parts of the muscle where he will ask for more contraction and parts for less contraction. And this will fluctuate during the day. We have what we call the muscular tone, that is our basic contraction. When we go to sleep, this muscular tone fades away. And when we start to wake up in the morning, we get more muscular tone, we get more activity, we shower, we take a coffee, the muscular tone is maximal, and by the end of the day, it starts to drop again. Meanwhile, we can have moments where we have an expression, where we frown, where we smile, where we do a lot of expressions, and so the muscle is contracted for this expression temporarily. And when this expression is over, it's totally relaxed, like for children. Children, they can have very fierce expressions when they cry, but when they get their candy and you hug them, it fades away and instantly it's gone. So what happens with age? With aging, we lose this synchronicity between the afferent and the efferent nerves. That means we don't have this immediate feedback. We have it delayed and slow because the cables are not so okay. It's like I would text you a message, what do we eat tonight? And you send me a message back like 3 weeks later, I bought a pizza. But it's 3 weeks later. Doesn't make any sense. I'm not even in the country. So we need this collaboration instantly, and then we get a good muscular tone. And when we get a good muscular tone, we keep the volume of the muscle, which is important. The muscle pulls on the bone, so we preserve the bone volume. And after each expression, we got a relaxation of the muscle. And this keeps a young face. Now, what happens with time is we lose tone, we lose volume of the muscle, we lose bone volume, and we get residual contractions that we cannot relax anymore. So what did we invent? We invented this botulinum toxin, which we call Botox, to cut off the connection between the brain and the muscle, which means the muscle doesn't receive any impulses anymore from the brain. Of course, the muscle relaxes completely because there is no message. At the same time, we lose the feedback from the muscle to the brain. We lose muscular tone. We don't have this volume anymore. And we are totally relaxed. We don't have this expression line. So this gives us a very odd face after a while, with atrophy of the muscle, atrophy of the bone, all the muscles in the surrounding which are trying to take over this vacant position of this muscle. So we get a bit of a strange face. And we sell it as rejuvenation, while we never looked at how young people express their face. Young people, they keep their muscular tone and they relax the expression each time that the expression is not valid anymore. So they keep the muscular tone and they keep the capacity to have expression lines and to relax, and they keep their volume and the volume of the bone, while we cannot do that. We cannot do that when we inject Botox. We lose everything. We lose our muscular tone, we lose our volume of the muscle, we lose the volume of the bone, and we cannot express anymore. On the other hand, if we want to reactivate muscles, like for lifting, there again we go with wrong terminologies. We're trying to activate this muscle, but we cannot do that without also enhancing and multiplying the expression lines. So we create maybe extra tone temporarily, because it's not a feedback situation, but we create also more expression lines. This is what I called the muscle-brain paradox. We can only do one thing at a time, while the brain does several things at a time. And the brain can contract part of the muscle and relax another part of the muscle. So here we come to the myth number one, which is lifting and gravity. We tend to think that the face drops down through gravity. Nothing is further than the truth. What happens in the face is muscles lose their tone, so we get kind of a sagging. But on the other hand, there are muscles that are overcontracted and cannot relax, like the platysma that we have here, and like the depressor angulus oris, the one that pulls up the corner of the mouth. They are in an overcontracted situation. So they add to the pulling downwards. They pull downwards and we don't have the force to pull it upwards. But we see also the situation on the forehead when we age. They stay in an overcontracted situation. We get these horizontal lines, the eyebrows that pull up, and an overcontracted frontalis muscle. So what we have to do if you want a nice face that is nicely lifted is to reduce the unnecessary and involuntary contraction of the lower part and the upper part. So the eyebrows come on the right position, which is lower, and enhance the muscular tone so that we can build up this natural lift that young people have, preserve the muscular volume, and preserve the muscular bone, the bone that is attached to the muscle, and all this in a vertical fashion. A lifting doesn't do that. We call it a D-plane vertical lift, but actually that's not what's happening. Instead of the muscle pulling itself up like an athlete on a bar pulls itself up, we take this muscle who lost its capacity to contract, we hook it up on the deep plane, and we pull it up a few centimeters upwards, and we hook it up. That means it's totally not dynamic. It's like the athlete that pulls himself up on a bar. We say you can't do that anymore because your muscles are weak. We're gonna put a butcher's hook in your neck, and we're gonna hang you up 1 meter higher. And now it's fantastic. But that's not a lifting. A lifting is a dynamic situation. And we cannot do that vertical because there is nothing to hook up vertical. So we put it on the side. When we use the term vertical lifting, it's not a correct term because it's not fully vertical. And it's static. So it looks nice on a picture after the lifting, but when you sit across these people at the table for a dinner, you see that the movement is totally different because it's frozen on a certain moment while you continue to age, lose muscular volume, bone, etc. And the lifting stays the way it was designed a year or 2 or 3 ago. So liftings don't age really well with you. And it's a static lift, while young people have a dynamic lift. And you don't do anything to the bone volume, don't do anything to the muscle volume, don't do anything to the relaxation after each contraction. So a lifting is a relatively bad idea. So it's clear that the facial shape is the one who dominates youth, not so much the skin. A baby, even if he has expression lines, even if he has spots, babies can have acne, still identified as a baby. While older people with a face that has been pulled up with a lifting, even if they have a smooth skin, you recognize that they are aged. So a facial shape is the most important thing, and it's done by activating the nerves to the muscles, not the muscles. The only one who is allowed to activate the muscles is the brain, not an external machine, because we don't have any feedback from that machine. If we give contractions through patches on top of the skin, it has nothing to do with the way the brain activates the muscle with thousands of receptors into the muscles. We don't get the feedback. We cannot organize this muscle that it will contract differently in different spaces. So only the brain, and we have to connect it with the nerves. So when we come now to the skin, we pay too much attention to the skin because the skin is not the one who is really building up our face. You can compare it with these sofas in French castles. They are built with layers of springs and bands, etc., and then thicker tissue. And the top layer of this nice silk tissue is not defining the shape of your armchair. So the epidermis is 0.1 millimeter thick, which is virtually nothing. It's less than the paint of your car, and it determines essentially the color. If we are white, brown, or black, it's essentially this very, very thin layer of 0.1 millimeter maximum, which determines that. Underneath, we have a dermis, and we tend to believe that the dermis with the collagen is what is giving us the strength. But in fact, everything happens 2 layers underneath. Under the hypodermis, we have this fascia. And we know by now that this fascia is giving us the tensile strength to pull up the skin, to give us elasticity, and to eliminate our wrinkles. If we have a nice tight skin, it's the fascia underneath the skin, and this is an electrical phenomenon. Okay? So through electricity in these fibers and through special fibroblasts that produce these fibers, we get a nice skin. Until now, we didn't have anything to deal with this fascia, with this electric fascia. Okay? That is very important. Even when we talk about hydration, binding water to our system is equally an electrical phenomenon. And all this has been replaced by other technologies. Lasers that heat the skin. Now, I've talked about it many times. Collagen that has been damaged by heat contracts. We know that. Why? We put our steak or whatever meat that we put on a barbecue, it contracts because collagen contracts with heat. And we create like a scar situation that heals later. But no way that a scar tissue that healed would be better in quality than a young skin. You take a grandpa, you burn his skin, it will not be of better quality than his grandson. Okay? An undamaged, healthy young skin has a different type of collagen than an older, damaged, heated up collagen. This is something that we should be aware of. Secondly, the factories that build that collagen, which we call fibroblasts. These are cells. We tend to activate them in the sense of stimulate them to create more collagen. We create a stress situation where they waken up and they produce more collagen. Again, we use wrong terminology. We call it new collagen. It is new in the sense that it wasn't there the day before, but it's not new in the sense that it's of better quality. We take an old factory and we produce of the old material again and again. We make new collagen every 6 months. But our grandmother who is 80, in 6 months' time, she will not have a new face. She will have a face that is 6 months older. And why? Although she made the new batch of collagen, it's still of the quality of her age. If we want to make really good quality collagen, we have to change the factory. Not stimulate the factory to make more, but renew the factory. And renewing this fibroblast, we do it with connecting it to oxygen and the blood flow, connecting it with the nervous system and connecting it with the whole system of drainage of toxins. And then we got a healthy fibroblast. And this healthy fibroblast doesn't need any activation. Just like a 5-year-old child doesn't need an activation of its fibroblast. They work optimally, perfectly well. So the whole idea is not to go and stimulate, not to go and inject, but building the feedback loops again so that it will be healthy. Now there is a tendency now for what we call rejuvenation through injection of active substances in the body, whether it's PRP, exosome, stem cells, etc. So people come every once in a while and inject their face with boosters and whatever we can inject to stimulate the system. We claim that these are natural products that the body produces to enhance us. But the thing is, the body needs to produce them, because otherwise we create a dependency on an injection every 3 to 4 months. And we didn't heal the situation. It's just like with diabetes. The pancreas is supposed to produce insulin. But instead, if it doesn't produce, we inject insulin after every meal or at the end of the day. This is not rejuvenation. This is taking over the job of the pancreas and injecting it and creating a dependency. We didn't solve the problem. We didn't heal it. So continuous injections in the skin every once in a while to inject substances that the body is supposed to produce by itself is not a rejuvenation. That must be clear. We must stimulate the body to create it ourselves. By the way, the system of injecting is also not a well-taught system. A cell is 40 microns like we talked. The spaces between the cells are 4 microns, so we can deliver in every mailbox. A needle is 300 microns. 300 microns, which is about 9 times the size of the cell. which is about 80 times the size of the capillaries. So imagine if you want to deliver to the cell, and instead of coming with a bike and putting it in every mailbox, you come with like a huge truck and a trailer who doesn't even enter the city. And all you do is you dump everything near the airport and you try to flood the city. But that's not the way it's fed. You don't want to flood it. We have a piping system going around of capillaries. You want water in your house. You get it from the pipe. A thin pipe enters your apartment. You got a faucet. You got a drainage, and everything works fine. Imagine the city wouldn't give you those pipes, but once in a while, once every 3 months, we'd flood the city with water. Is that the same thing? Do you want to have a shower with a flood every 3 months? Or do you want to have pipes where you can decide to take a shower in the morning or in the evening, close them and everything is in order? So even the delivery system is not a correct one. And we wonder why we don't get natural results and why the patient still keeps to be dependent on our treatments every few months. So that is not real rejuvenation. So I classified it in 3 categories. And the analogy is a student that goes to college. He goes to college, he studies by himself, he finishes with a degree, he's capable of doing his job independently, and he's a skilled professional. Needs no help from anybody. This is self-healing. This is what we're aiming for. Then you got the one who says, I want some help for my studies, and he gets a tutor. And then when he comes to the exam, he wants the tutor to come with him. At the end, he gets a degree, but he's not capable of doing anything independent, and he becomes totally dependent on this tutor. This is what we deal with now with rejuvenation that is totally dependent on the doctor and the clinic. It's not really rejuvenation. And the third one is the student who says, I'm too tired to go to college. Maybe we can download a degree from internet. I'll put my name on it and I will make like a fake diploma and a fake certificate. This is what's happening when we say we lost volume of the muscle, but we're not going to build the muscle. We inject there a substance called hyaluronic acid to fill it instead of it. The muscles are supposed to lift our face vertically. We're not going to work on the connections with the brain. We put the hook behind them and we hang them higher. No specific movement. This is the artificial part of what we call looking younger. What happens with a fake degree? At the end, you get caught. What happens with fake rejuvenation? Once you reach 55 and all these loops start to degrade seriously, you get caught and you get a face that is totally not you anymore, looks weird, and we know how all these faces at the age of 60 look like. If 50 can be the new 30, 60, 65 will be the new 80 because you look weird. The structures inside have never been rejuvenated and you will look totally odd. So that's why I advocate for internal and natural rejuvenation, because it's very easy to perform when you're a bit younger. It works fine when you're a bit older, and you'll never have this distorted face that is inevitable once you're getting older, and the hyaluronic acid attracts water, it starts to shift, etc., and the liftings don't look anymore the way they were designed like 10 years ago. We talk a lot about personalization. And I was one of the first, I believe, in 1998 to create a cosmetic line and a technology to measure the skin and create personalization in a book that I wrote, Your Skin Type. We shifted from there. We understood that instead of taking something from the outside and try to personalize it, We better heal ourselves from the inside, where we go to the next level of personalization, the ultimate personalization, which is exactly you. There is no higher degree of personalization than you who heal your own body. The body knows what the problem is. It has the building blocks. It has the force to repair it, the workforce to repair it. It has read the DNA, so it knows exactly the manual what to do with it. And it does it for free. It never sends you an invoice. This is the highest level of personalization, you. All the rest are external systems. What is the problem with external systems? They lack feedback. And the body thrives on feedback. Not only it has the manual in the DNA, the building blocks that are identically yours, not a foreign material, okay? The people to do it who are inside the body and you know exactly the enzymatic processes, how to do that, much better than the external injector. But they get feedback constantly, which means every movement they do, they get feedback what's happening. And we know how important feedback is. If you do something without the control of what is happening, I mean, nothing can work. Everything can go wrong. Every professional in the world knows I do an action and I observe the reaction. I do another action and I re-observe the reaction. And that is how progress is made, through feedback. Most of what we do lack the feedback mechanism to get something that is really you and perfectly done. That is why personalization for me is the past. Self-healing is the ultimate form of personalization. Loss of volume is kind of a hot topic in aesthetic medicine. And we developed injectables for that we call volumizers. There are several types of volumizers. We'll not enter into that in detail. We know that we have several types of hyaluronic acid, but we got also other types, going even to our own fat, autologous fat injections through semi-degradable products, etc. Now, we always said these volume pads that we lose are fat pads in the face. And we always show these beautiful pictures of fat pads in the face. But CT scans have shown us that the volume is in fact the muscle. And not only that, we know that intuitively. For instance, when we want to do face slimming and make these jaws look thinner and have a slimmer face, which is a lot done for Asians, Asian population, Koreans, they do that a lot, we inject Botox or botulinum toxin in a muscle that is called the masseter muscle. Why? Because we want to reduce the volume of this muscle and get a slimmer face. Which means once you inject Botox there, you lose the volume on this place. So what do we understand from that? First of all, that muscles are indeed responsible for volume and not so much the fat pads. It's really the muscle, just like we see in the CT scans. And after we destroy the muscle, the bone will be destroyed. So we know that that is number one in volume creation, okay? So look at what is happening with time, and we don't even pay attention to that. We lose volume here in the temporal area. And volume in the temporal area gives us a hollow temple. This muscle is extremely important to lift our face because it goes to the inside and it lifts our face. It gives us support. The same thing with the masseter muscle and all the muscles inside. They give us the strength to lift everything. Instead of building them up by connecting them back to the brain, we wait till they're gone and then we inject here volumizers to replace a muscle. And that's what we do in the totality of our face, injecting volumizers to compensate for muscular loss. The muscle is a dynamic structure. The volumers are a static thing. You cannot replace a dynamic muscle by a static hyaluronic acid or other volumizers. You will look odd, and when the volumizers will start shifting or attracting more water, you'll look even more odd. And you didn't solve the problem, because the problem was not only volume, but also the strength of the muscle to lift your face and to preserve your bone. So I'm very much against a blind injecting of volumizers in places where muscle should be regenerated. I used to do a lot of eyelid surgeries. We call it blepharoplasties. And something weird happened to me. And I'm talking about 10 years ago. We had a leakage of the Botox, like it could happen. It touches this small muscle, which is called the levator of the eyelid, levator palpebrae superioris, and the eyelid tends to droop, closed eye. Very annoying situation because there is not so much you can do about it. So we tried electromodulation to activate the muscle. And we don't do that necessarily on the muscle, we do that more on the nerve that connects to the muscle. And what we saw is not only the drooping went away, but the excess of skin went away. Because when the muscle pulls backwards, the same skin that we see hanging over the eyelid is the same skin that goes inside when the muscle pulls it back. So we did the other eyelid at the request of the patient, and we saw that his eyelid skin went in. And that's when we realized, sadly, that the overhanging skin on the upper eyelid is not a skin problem. We don't have too much skin. We have a muscular tone of this very small muscle, which is called the levator, which is lost, and the skin goes forward instead of staying backward. If you want to understand how it feels, imagine late night and you're in front of your computer or in front of your television and your eyes are closing because you lost the tone of this muscle. So reactivating the tone of this muscle solves our first problem with eyes, and that is the eyelid that goes backwards, the skin, and we don't need to operate. Second part that it solved is the orbicularis muscle, the round muscle around the eye, is gaining tone because it loses tone. And look how interesting nature is. On one hand, you got crow feet because of an overcontraction. On the other hand, you got round eyes because of a loss of tone. So we understand that the connections are not okay, because if the connections are okay, the tone will be perfect and the relaxation will be perfect. Now, when we started to work around the eyes, the crow feet disappeared and we got this straight line under the eyes, which is the hallmark of young people, and a straight like we would do with what we call in technical terms a cantopexy, which means taking the corner of the eyelid and pulling it up and stitching it to the bone to have a straight line. But now we can do that just by activating this muscle and connecting it with the brain. Now, around the eye is a very complicated area. We've got a circulation that is very delicate. We've got a lymphatic drainage that is very delicate because it's going here under the ligament. So that's why it's often blocked. So the muscles have a problem. Lymphatic drainage has a problem. Vascularity has a problem because we don't have enough oxygen around this muscle. And we get what we call the malar bags. The ligaments are stiffer. And for these malar bags, we don't really have a solution. It's a very big problem. There's no solution for that. People inject underneath, but it makes it worse, etc. But when we do electromodulation, we get more oxygen, more vascularity, more lymphatic drainage, a muscle that is tighter. Everything is in place and the skin looks better. On top of that, if you go to the frontalis, you get a relaxation of the frontalis because you don't stay in a contraction, but nothing droops because you increase your muscular tone and you increase your muscular volume and you preserve your bone. So the whole area around the eye is a beautiful area to treat with electromodulation. And we cannot do that with other technologies. We cannot start activating the muscle with electromyostimulation. We cannot start injecting here products to keep the volume, burning the skin for the malar bags, and all these kind of injecting Botox here and having even more fluid retention. So we don't need 6 or 7 actions with a lot of side effects. One action which solves everything from the inside. And this is the marvelous thing of self-healing. Because it deals with a full region, it preserves also the relationship between the elements of this region. There is like a hierarchy and a relationship between the ligaments, the muscles, the skin, the fluid retention, etc. They all together. And once we enhance, everything remains in the right proportions. While when we act from the outside, we will distort the proportions. And even if we acted on one point, it will not be coherent anymore with the rest of the region. So that is why self-healing is extremely important. Beside the fact that we have feedback constantly, we also arrange a region that is in coherence with itself.
Could you talk about a few practical indications that you do daily with Rayu?
Yes, definitely. First of all, of course, we have the lifting of the face, what we call it, which is a standard procedure for everybody who has a little bit of a sagging face. But what becomes increasingly important is the drainage of toxins and fluid from the face. Why? Because a lymph drainage that doesn't happen properly is contributing to aging very, very much. This is one thing. We see when people start to eat unhealthy, they get a puffy face. Alcoholics have a puffy face, yes, because these toxins are accumulated. And when we do a lymph drainage with electromodulation, the first thing that people tell them, oh, did you lose weight? But it's not. It's just that the face became slimmer, all the liquid has gone. If we continue and do that for the double chin, and at the same time we activate the muscles of the floor of the mouth, between the jawline, the hyoid bone, and the ciliate bone, we activate those muscles and we drain the fluid, we can get rid of the double chin, of what we call the double chin, which is very important. Even more frequent, and definitely in countries where a lot of people have been injected with hyaluronic acid, is the removal of the puffiness through hyaluronic acid. Why is that so important? When we inject hyaluronic acid, in fact, we compensate for muscle that has been lost. With time, we get more and more hyaluronic acid that does not disappear. They always told us that it's going away. It's not. It's losing its viscosity, so you don't feel it anymore. It flattens out and it migrates. And then it attracts fluid. After a while, over the years, that you get more and more injections, you get more hyaluronic acid and less muscle. At a certain moment, the hyaluronic acid, which will attract fluid, will give you this puffiness in the face, and we call it the pillow face, or sometimes they call it filler fatigue. It has different names, but it's always the same thing. Your face is unrecognizably bloated because of this hyaluronic acid. These people, they need, I would even say urgently, electromodulation, not only to remove the excess of fluid, but also to build up the muscle so that it will have a better proportion between the hyaluronic acid and the muscle. Injecting hyaluronic acid in the face needs a substrate. It needs like a bed to hold it. You cannot inject it into a void where nothing is there. So you need your muscles in order to keep this hyaluronic acid a little bit in its place. So this is one of the major indications. Get rid of the lymphatics, activate the muscle, build up enough muscle to hold your hyaluronic acid. That's an important thing. Then we understood already that the skin is built out of cohesion of cells and the fascia underneath. And this is extremely important if we're dealing with a tight skin. Tightening of the skin is tightening of the fascia and having a cohesion of the cells. When you get a cohesion of the cells and you have a tight fascia, you will see that areas that are very difficult to deal with, like around the eyes or the neck with a thin skin or even the inner arms, they will get a lot better. Now, to get back a second to the lymphatic drainage, a lot of people who have cellulite, these dimplings and fluid on the legs, they are very much helped by electromodulation because it tightens the skin, it removes the fluid, and it creates thin legs with tight skin that remain for years. And this is because we create a lymphatic drainage with electromodulation and we get tightening of the skin with electromodulation. Combination of those give great results for this bothersome problem. Now, if we go back to the skin, we know that electromodulation has a certain kind of selectivity. What does it mean? Every part in the body who has a problem, who is troubled, will have a different electrical resistance, which means that when the electromodulation therapy goes through this organ, the places that are diseased or deficient will have more benefit than the surrounding skin, which is very good because selectivity is exactly what we are looking for. We want to target the problem, but not the surrounding healthy places. So when do we have that? We have that for pores, open and dilated pores. We got more resistance there, and we can close the pores very quickly, 1 or 2 sessions. Acne scars, and definitely acne scars of a certain type, the rolling scars or the box scars, in darker skin, because you don't want to damage that delicate skin because it becomes more pigmented, okay? And you have more resistance on these acne scars. So that's a great indication. Everything that has to do with pigmentation disorders, and definitely when we're going to a deeper dermal pigment. To explain a little bit, we talked about the epidermis, which determines the color between white, brown, black, yellow. The difference is this very fine layer of epidermis. And the color should stay there. What happens when the color goes through the basal membrane into the dermis in a layer where it doesn't belong? It creates pigmentations that are very difficult to remove. And they are bothering us very, very much. And there is nothing we can use to take them away without damaging the skin and creating even more pigmentation problems. Okay? So, acne pimples that get dark, any scar that darkens, just hormonal pigmentations that are deep and dark. All this is an inflammatory problem. It's a problem of vascularization and inflammation. When we do electromodulation on these areas, we get great success on pigmentation, which is deep dermal, melasma, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, and above all, the dark circles around the eyes, what we call the raccoon eyes. Okay, because this is a very delicate region and it's very hard to deal with that. And with electromodulation, we improve the whole region, the wrinkles, the skin type, but also the pigmentation. So these are very important things. Inflammation through to eczema to psoriasis, very good results. Unclogging the pores for people who have a tendency to acne and prevent them from having new lesions. Excellent indication for that. So the skin has a lot of indications for electromodulation because we deal with the cohesion of the cells, we deal with the fascia, we deal with the anti-inflammatory effects, and we deal with all the active agents like platelets release in this area. So excellent therapy to improve the skin. Hydration above everything, because keeping water in the skin is an electrical phenomenon, and we should understand that. The water is different and it binds electrically. We talk a lot about drinking water with electrolytes to hold them in the cells, because electricity plays an important role in holding water in our body. So that's about the skin. There is a lot more to tell about that, but I suppose we'll make other videos for that. But for the moment, we'll stick to that. Important is also hair loss. And when you look at me, I don't have hair. You say, what treatment do you do for hair loss? Well, we talked earlier that in order for self-healing to work fine, you need to be in a stage where the organ is still alive. You cannot make a tooth regrow, and you cannot make a dead hair follicle regrow. So you need to take them in a stage where the hair follicle is still there. We don't even mind that it's a little bit weaker than normal, but not dead. Once the hair follicle is dead, not much will help you. Hair transplant surgery can cover that for as long as you still have hair in the back and that the place that you need to cover is quite limited, and you cannot sustain that for the rest of your life. You do 2 hair transplants, 3 is a maximum, and then it's over. And then you continue to lose and you look very odd because these transplants are still alive and the rest of the hair around it is lost. So, electromodulation for hair follicles works especially because it enhances the blood flow, the very tiny capillary blood flow in the hair follicle. It connects the nerves to the stem cells and to the pigmentation of the hair follicle. So a new hair follicle can regrow hair. It drains the lymphatics around the hair follicle. People don't know it, but there are lymphatics around the hair follicle, and they prevent you from growing hair if they are clogged. We have the anti-inflammatory part. A lot of the hair losses are inflammatory driven. We get the cohesion of the cells as one organ. A hair follicle stays together, not because there is glue, but because there are ion gaps and because it's one cohesive element that has a programmation. And of course, we should not forget all the active ingredients that are generated, like the platelet who degranulate, so we don't have to inject PRP in the scalp, which is for me a quite aggressive situation. A needle of 300 micron, and the hair follicle is maximum 100, usually about 50. So you see, 6 times bigger. Injecting it in the dermis is very, very painful. Under the dermis, it doesn't reach it. So there are a lot of problems, and you have to do it your whole life. So you better use something that is totally not invasive and preserves your hair follicles for the rest of your life. So that's what I have to say about hair follicles and hair. It's not so much the hair growth, it's more the preservation of the follicles that you have now, because once you lost them, you have a problem.
So a lot of ladies later on in life, they face issues with urinary incontinence, and the treatment options that are widely available are very invasive and painful. And there are not too many good alternatives for them. So how can electromodulation help these ladies?
Not only women have problems with urinary leakage and flow, but men too. They just have the opposite situation. They have the blockage where they wake up 5 times a night to go to the bathroom and searching for bathrooms during the day, while women have this problem where they need to find a bathroom in the neighborhood, in the vicinity all the time. So sometimes they don't even dare to take a bus, or they go to trains and they're always carrying these pads with them, which can stuff all their purse. So it's very, very annoying, and it affects the quality of life very, very much. The solutions are indeed Operation Sling, which have a lot of side effects. Operations with laser, where we burn the urethra from the inside, quite invasive and aggressive, okay? Or these pads that are very costly, they're smelly and not very interesting. For men, it's terrible because there is hardly any operation for that, unless widening the size of the urethra with an invasive operation. While for women, it's a laser that burns and makes the hole a bit bigger. For women, it's exactly the opposite. It's a laser that burns from the outside and makes the urethra shrink. Both are not very interesting because they don't touch the core of the problem. And now we are here to understand better where the problem is. The problem is not the urethra, the tube that goes from the bladder to the outside. We are conceived in a very interesting way. We have a bladder and a muscle, and we have a pipe that drains everything outside with a muscle around it. All this is activated and programmed by nerves, a neuronal system. And these nerves, they do the following. When the bladder is full, they get a signal. You need to go to the bathroom. And when you go to the bathroom, they contract the muscle of the bladder and they relax the muscle of the urethra at the same time. Two opposite actions, two opposite commands. Once the bladder is empty, they relax the muscle of the bladder and they contract the muscle of the urethra, so everything is sealed. This is perfectly working till the age where the nervous damage has lost the control of this fascinating interaction. So you understand that repairing the nerves and bringing them back under the control of the brain is the first thing we need to do. And not start from the outside saying, okay, we don't have this harmony anymore. Let's burn the urethra so it contracts. And then that's only one situation. The contraction happens after urination. You want to have permanently a closed urethra? Not very interesting. And that you have to push harder? No. What we have to do is act on the nerves, because the main problem is the bladder, not the urethra. The bladder starts to contract without your will, and you cannot hold it back because the bladder is stronger than the urethra. So, once we start regenerating these nerves, and they are very tiny nerves, and they depend on the sympathetic and orthosympathetic nerves. So what we call the autonomous nervous system. Why autonomous? Because it works with a certain autonomy, with its own decisions. The body doesn't want us to think each time that we do automatic things, like going to the bathroom or swallowing food or things like that. It needs to go on automatic pilot, okay? So these autonomous systems, when we repair it, we see that, first of all, the bladder doesn't get irritated so much, and that we don't need to go to the bathroom as often, which is very good because this is one of the main problems of stress incontinence, okay? Then we see that if we go to the bathroom and contract, the urethra opens, which we need to do. A burning of laser or a sling operation to close it will not give us an open urethra, which we need, okay? And we need to close it afterwards and relax the bladder. So electromodulation has its main indication in urinary incontinence for women and urinary blockage in second instance for men. For women, from the first session on, they see the difference. And usually in 4 sessions, they solve the problem totally if it's urge or stress incontinence. Men, because they have a little bit more complicated urinary system, because the urethra has to go through the prostate and it has a very long way before it gets outside. We have 2 sessions to initiate it and then another 4 or 5 sessions to consolidate the situation. But this is really one of the main indications for electromodulation, and it's a very elegant session because you keep your underwear on, because we're not concerned by the organs, the genital organs. We're concerned by the connection of these organs with the spine. And this goes around the groin and around the lower back and around the pubic area. So I would say it's either a pleasant or a totally painless situation, which doesn't embarrass the patient because he can keep his underwear on. And I find this a major advantage compared to whatever exists now. We have many gynecologists using that, many famous gynecologists like presidents and vice presidents of gynecological societies who talk about that openly and urge women to go to that. And usually what happens is, because women have a long-standing relationship with their gynecologist from the age of 15, 16, 18, while men don't have a relationship with their andrologist. So they drive their husbands, which are in the same situation, to get the same treatment. So we get them in a second instance. And I'm very glad for that because this is a real life changer. While wrinkles may or may not affect your life on a daily basis, urinary incontinence and blockage affects your life daily.
I'm a gynecologist working almost 40 years, and one of our topics, what we speak with women around perimenopause, is urinary problems, urinary incontinence. And the main question which is asked, can you help me? It's so inconvenient that quality of life is changing, and are there methods to help, not only surgical? So we have now a new method called REU. It's a biovitalization of tissue, and it's giving back, I would say, new life to tissues that are becoming older with time, and new life. It means better quality of life.
Acute pain is life-saving. We know that. We put our hands in the vicinity of fire and we have to retract it immediately because it burns. It saved our hand from burning. And so is every acute pain sensation. It's absolutely necessary. Where it becomes abnormal is a chronic pain situation. Chronic pain doesn't warn us of anything. It's like a broken record that got stuck somewhere, you see, and it's all over the same song. And why did it get stuck? Because pain is transferred, like all the sensations, in afferent and efferent nerves, which means back and forth. They need to be synchronized and they need to have a good speed. Otherwise, the communication with the brain is disturbed. Chronic pain is a disturbance of these communication pathways between the back and the forth nerves. And because they are very fine nervous fibers, pain fibers or C fibers, they are very fine fibers, it's very easy to solve that problem. And we see our technology work also for peripheral neuropathy. A lot of people suffer from peripheral neuropathy. Why? There is little oxygen and little blood flow in the nerves, and the nerves start to become degraded, and they start sending signals of tickling and prickling and pain and whatever, and numbness, and we have that more and more because of a bad lifestyle. And this bad lifestyle affects neuropathy very much because it's a long nerve, you know, from the spine till the lower leg. And a lot of people call us for neuropathy to be treated with electromodulation. And we see results in diabetics, elderly people, people with damage to the nerves for many other reasons. And it's very encouraging to see that a treatment like that would be able to take care of a very important issue, because neuropathy also prevents you from walking straight after a while. So you lose your equilibrium. There are a lot of sensors on the soles of the feet which guide you where to go, okay? I would even think, if I can think freely, that athletes in the future who have very developed sensors of equilibrium and pressure on the feet, because, you know, when you're a basketball player or a football player, you switch from left to right foot, and it's not always the full foot, it's a part, and you can dribble, you can do a lot of things with a good nervous system. So I would imagine that they would like to improve this skill and get a better nervous connection on their feet. Now, in the same area, athletes have a lot of injuries, and injuries is part of their life. And once we can, on the articulations where they injure the most, like ankles, knees, etc., we can enhance the blood flow. We can drain the lymphatics and the fluid. We can reconnect the nerves and repair the pain. We can get there these platelets-derived substances and cut the inflammation. And we have seen that. We get great results after sports injuries. But recently we have also seen that when they train and they got pain or soreness in these areas where they trained, that the part that has been treated with electromodulation recovers much quicker. Now, I didn't know anything about the sports world. I wasn't raised in a sports environment. But we got close to people in our workforce who are top athletes. I mean, golden medals and champions are in their kind. And they explained me that to become a good athlete, you have to go beyond the injury threshold. So you have to create some injury. And the one who can repair it in a better and swifter way will be the one who ultimately will become the champion. And so dealing with trainings and having the RIU done before the match reduces the number of injuries. After the match, reduces the number of people who didn't recover. And after trainings, they recover much better and they can become like a better performing athlete. So sports injuries and articulations are a main concern for us with electromodulation. We start our life in a bad position, not in pole position, but in a really bad position. We are like in a very round shape from the moment that we become bigger than the womb, and that is about 4 or 5 months. And during the last months of our life, we are a bit in a roll like a shrimp. And usually we should solve that at birth. And ancient cultures, they didn't have C-sections, cesarean sections. And they gave birth like in the normal way, with the face down, which means that the first manipulation, osteopathic manipulation of the spine of the newborn was through a normal, natural birth. And then it wasn't even enough. Some of these cultures, they had a ritual by the lady, which was either midwife or assistant to the midwife, which was called a doula. It depends a little bit on the terminology between the regions, but she would take the baby, 3.5 kilos on average, with the thumb and hold it on the palate up. So the baby was hanging on the thumb in his mouth. And then she took like lukewarm oil with herbs, and they were massaging and just releasing the vertebrae so that you could start your life in a straight position. Nowadays, we have a lot of C-sections, so we don't have even the natural birth. This skill of dealing with the spine immediately after birth is not there. And we end up, for 80% of us, having spine problems during our lives, with back pain, lower back pain, higher back pain, neck pain, etc. It's a very common problem. So we thought about, what about reorganizing and reconnecting these muscles of the spine, left and right, with the control of the brain, so the brain was not affected really by the birth, but the spine is, so it can reorganize itself through self-healing so that the brain will heal these muscular mass on the neck. Turns out to be not a bad idea at all, and more people are coming for what we call the spine reset. Now, recently I had a grandchild, and two friends, colleagues of mine, the parents decided to go to an osteopath. This is specialized people who deal with babies. They deal with them before they're born, but they deal with them certainly after they're born, and they straighten the spine in an amazing way. And children grow more straight and they're stronger. It's an osteopathic treatment of the spine. But this is something that we should not neglect. Running around our whole lives because the spine is not okay is not a good way for the quality of our lives. So this is a point I wanted to say about electromodulation. We talked already about the gut and how the intestines have muscles and specialized cells, which we call the cells of Cajal, which give an electrical impulse, and so we have these contractions of the bowel, so we get a normal bowel transit. So this is very important because constipation or diarrhea are two major problems, and we don't have really physiological responses for that. We can give pills, but it will never give us a good, consistent, normal stool. It gives us like something that doesn't really resemble the stool. Now, I had a recent discussion with an analyst of microbiome. We were sitting down in the same hotel, and there was a congress on microbiome, not very far, in Northern Europe where I live. And he explained to me that what he does is analyze statistically the microbiome, and they correlate it to the bowel movement. And a very fast bowel movement, like in diarrhea, doesn't yield a healthy microbiome. And a very slow bowel movement, like with constipation, doesn't yield either a healthy microbiome. And what does it mean? That means that if we don't have a transit which is a normal transit, but the train goes too slow or too fast, the ingredients that we have to absorb from the intestines are not absorbed in a normal way, which means that we will absorb toxins, things that are not meant to stay very long in the intestines, and we will get what we call a leaky gut syndrome. And a leaky gut syndrome means that the gut is not capable anymore from selecting what goes inside the body and what goes outside the body. And we understand very clearly that having the poo that needs to be inside the body is not a healthy thing. And that's exactly what's happening. And the irritable bowel syndrome is linked to the leaky gut syndrome, but more than 20 serious diseases are equally linked to what we call the leaky gut syndrome. And we're talking about stroke, cardiac arrest, diabetes, cancers, dementia, and a whole bunch. Now, it's very complicated to understand how many diseases can have this impact. But if we think in electrical biological concepts, we understand that when we change the current in our body, when everything turns highway, that all these diseases can happen at the same time. So for me, a healthy bowel movement through electromodulation, because now we can impact this bowel movement through working from the outside, the skin on the belly area, totally painless. We can impact that and we can create a healthy bowel movement. Of course, we will have to add to that the right food. We'll have to add fibers to that to get a healthy bowel movement. We'll have to add a right sequence of how we ingest our food. We have to reduce the refined things and the things that stick to the intestines. Milk should also be reduced, and milk products, because they have proteins with a lot of phosphor. And the proteins with a lot of phosphor, curiously, they compete with calcium. So we think, okay, let's drink milk for the calcium. Mind you, you're killing a part of this calcium metabolism too at the same time. So, but if everything goes in a good transit, you don't have these problems. Everything runs smooth. You absorb what you absorb. Worst case scenario is that you didn't absorb enough nutrients, but at least you didn't absorb toxic products in your system. So this is one for reaching good health. But we know that the intestines don't live on their own. Nobody lives on its own in the body. They are connected with the brain, with the heart, together. And they are connected through a nice cable that we call the vagal nerve, the longest nerve in our body, the thickest nerve, who connects the three systems. That it's very interesting. We talked about the three central organs, we talked about the three loops, and we talked of their importance. You see, coordination by the brain, which we'll talk in a few minutes, the heart that is creating electrons, the intestines that decide what goes in and out, and they're all connected by one cable. So we see how intelligent the natural world is, because instantly, at the same time, it takes into account the whole body. It's like if you have a chain with like 50,000 shops over the whole world, and like Starbucks or something, and you sell a coffee somewhere in the world, and it already takes into account everything in all the shops, and even the next crop of coffee, okay? That's how intelligent our body is. He will add that in his computing power to know how many beans you will need in next year or 3 years later by the fact that one shop consumed this and the other shop consumed that. From the outside, you can't do that. You don't even have access to this information. There is no computer as powerful as the brain to compute all this together and to get you a balanced, healthy life. And now we come to basically our last element here for the moment, because we are progressing in the research, is the brain. The brain is a bunch of cells which don't work together. We know that. They make one big part, and they are kind of one group, one organ. And they're interconnected. The neocortex, the limbic system, the reptilian brain, etc. They are neurons who fire their commands, and they are organized in regions. And we know that the prefrontal cortex is our thinking, but it's also overthinking, and it's also the one who causes us the stress. We know that the parietal cortex is the one who gives us the anxiety. Okay, the occipital cortex is the one who gives us the calmness to go and sleep well. So when our brain is on overdrive, we get all these problems. We cannot focus well, we get depressed, we get anxious, we have all this stress and anxiety, we don't sleep well. Now, this has been acknowledged already decades ago. And Stanford University developed a device with the SAINT protocol in 1980. And when we're talking about Stanford University, it's #1 university in the world. To go through magnetic power and magnetic coils and to deal with this kind of problems, especially the depression and anxiety. Recently, several psychiatrists have tried our device and were so satisfied that they purchased it for the relaxation of the prefrontal cortex and going back to the occipital cortex and dealing also with anxiety and depression. Now, it will become a great tool in the future for psychotherapy, but meanwhile, it does already its effect to calm down the daily stress that we have. So having a treatment with electromodulation, it's not only a physical experience of looking better or functioning better, it's also a mental experience of being in a better equilibrium and a better sleep. So I think that acknowledging the electricity in our body and understanding what it does and how we can impact that will become a big part of what we call electrobiological medicine.